Hello everyone and welcome to the session of HTML. Let's get started with HTML. Now before we understand what HTML does, we need to understand why HTML came into existence and its relationship with an XML. So what HTML is basically a markup language. A markup language by definition is basically any simple text language that has some sort of symbols introduced inside to structure your information inside a document. Now, if you want to read more about what and why the structures of HTML were created, you can always go to this website that is w3org.com, which is the World Wide Web's website. And in w3.org, w3c.org/HTML, you will get good references about the entire HTML language. They even have a fully blown explanatory course of it. So they've given a proper explanation of the history of HTML and why it came into being. And as you can see, it was created in the early 90s, but the root of it started somewhere in the mid 80s when the US military had created a network of computers to communicate with each other, which was later on adopted by the CERN labs, which is the Large Hadron Collider in Germany. And basically, they were also working with huge computer networks. And to make communication easy between these computers, they created a markup language. Now, a markup language is basically anything where you have some sort of a symbol. Let's say you have a message which says hello, and let's say on the other line I'm marking it up as from Jayesh. So over here the computer is supposed to interpret whatever has come before this colon, that is message. This means whatever is written after that is going to be the message, whereas whatever is written after this from and colon is supposed to be from whom it is. This is the very simplest form of a markup language that can be, but this is not well structured as is, because there could be errors in typing in. Therefore, our researchers came up with a beautiful structure known as XML, where you have opening and closing tags. For example, let's say I create a file and I open up a angular bracket which says message, and it will have a closing tag which is message. Now if you see, in both the cases the name of a tag which is same, but in the end it is enclosed with a slash which marks the end of this particular tag. Now anything enclosed within this is a message. Now, this wasn't that great enough, so we introduced something known as parent child relationships. You can have as many tags inside one tag to create a structure of a document. So, let's say you have someone who is sending the message. Also, you have some subject to it. Now, as you can see, it's much easier to interpret that this text has a meaning. We have a message, and there is some detail about from whom this message is coming from and what is the subject of this message. You can add more such items inside it, and you can always write more details about it. And these tags can also have special abilities known as attributes. Let's say I can have an attribute called priority, which can be set to high. So which I can create a program that reads this text information and highlight it in a specific order to me in the front end that can look very attractive, show me colors, maybe to identify images that look great. Now to save an XML file, as you can see, I've created this using Notepad. So this means it is simple text-based information. So in this text format, you can just simply save as, and we can save it in a specific folder of our choice. Now I have created this dedicated folder in my C drive, which I'm going to use. While saving the document, you can give whatever name you want. I'm going to call it message.xml. The extension should always be given as .xml. And while saving, you should save the type as star.star, which allows you to save a non-simple text file. The encoding of your document should always be UTF-8. Okay, this is basically an international character encoding which is recognized by all computers very easily. Now that we have saved our document, let's see how we can interact with it. This is the document which we created, message.xml. Now if I double click on this, automatically it opens up in my browser. I'm going to zoom this in a little bit. If you can see, my web browser already understands that this is some sort of a structure, and it also allows me to open and close the code fold that contains this information. This is the simplest way of creating an XML document. Now, as is, this was a simple format to communicate between computers that had a program that would recognize this. Now, eventually, we had to create some sort of format so that it could become more universal and could run across all operating systems. So therefore, a web standard was created, which is handled by W3C org, and that is the standard all software companies follow when they create their own browser. So if you create Internet Explorer, if you have Google Chrome or Microsoft Edge or Firefox or Opera or the so-called Brave browser, all of these are in compliance with or they follow the W3C standard for World Wide Web and HTML. Now, in XML, of course, the document description for XML is very simple, and your browsers are very smart to understand that this is an XML document. Earlier, we had to also provide a doc type declaration in the beginning, which defined that what type of a document this is. All right, let's move on to creating our first HTML document. So, welcome back. Now, let's take a deeper look into what XML structures look like and how HTML works. Now first, I'm going to show you an example. As you can see on the screen, we have a root element tag which I've created, inside of which I've created a parent element tag, and I've created one more parent. So you can have multiple repetitive tags as far as you've taken care that those are enclosed correctly. If you can see, I've created a parent tag and I've also enclosed it with a slash. Then I've started a new one. If you don't close this parent tag, and whatever tags are declared before closing it would be considered as a child tag inside it. Now I have used very obvious names over here, that is parent, child and subchild, for a better understanding of how an XML document is structured. Now if you look over here, you have a parent which has a child and it also has more children inside it. So an HTML document also will allow you to do the same. You can have multiple elements inside elements. Yes, these tags in HTML are known as XML, as elements. Now there are more examples which we can look at, as you can see. Now the whole point of showing you these examples is to get you to understand how XML is structured and how HTML is structured. Now XML is basically the primary markup language that was created, and HTML is something which was abstracted out of it and made more rich. Now HTML, what does HTML stand for? HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. And as the name has it, it has hypertext. Hyper meaning it has got more abilities and it has more richness to it. That is, you can apply colors, you can add media to it. Okay. Then again, it is text markup language. So it's not a programming language, it's rather an instruction set for your web browser to construct a visual page or a visual interface, as you can call it, and it is in plain text. It does not need to be compiled. It does not need to be put through any special language filter as such. So let's create our first HTML document. Now, to create a simple HTML document, we need to first declare the document type. The document type that we create, it has to be declared with this angled bracket, and it does not require any closing tag. This is a simple declaration, doc type HTML. Now, the web browsers these days have been programmed in such a way that they don't require to have this doc type declaration, but as a safe practice, a good programming practice, I would recommend you should. Next is the HTML tag. The HTML tag is basically which defines the root of your document. Okay, and there is an attribute that is one of the attributes that you can add to your HTML tag, that is lang. Lang stands for what is the default language of your web page. Now, if the lang is not mentioned as en, it's en stands for English. If I mention it for as GB or DE, that would be German. So your web browser will ask you whether you wish to translate this page. We will check that out in the later half, but let's look at further features now. So next what we have is the body tag and the head tag. Now the head tag is where meta information goes in. Meta information is basically information about information. So basically that is the information about your website, of your web page. And this is also where you can link style sheets and scripts which are supposed to run inside your page. The body tag is where the actual content goes in. Whatever is written inside the body tag will be displayed in the front end, that is on your browser. So if you have not written something inside the body tag, it may not be displayed. So one of the items that go inside your head tag is the character set, UTF-8. Now this is a very ignored point, so I'd say make a note of it. The UTF-8 is basically a set of characters, that is the character encoding used by ASCII to map your keyboard characters against certain alphabets and numerals. The character set, if it is set to something different, the website and its content might look slightly different on different browsers, especially when they are browsing it from different countries. And this used to be a huge problem in the mid 90s where different countries had their own character sets. UTF-8 is the most commonly used one, and you can follow that. Next is the meta for viewport. This is the modern one which was created to basically make the browser understand how it is supposed to display the content. That is, does it have to show the content scaled to a normal level, or does it have to display it as a desktop? Okay. You will understand more about this when you start learning CSS. Then there is a simple title tag. Title tag is basically whatever you write on the beginning of your document, which appears on the top of your web browser. I'm going to write my first HTML doc. Okay. Now we have the body tag, which is empty, and I'm going to put some tag over here. I'm going to call it the H1 tag, and I'm going to say hello world. Now, similar to XML, I can save this document as .html. Let's call it first.html. I have to change the file type to star.star, and we keep the encoding to UTF-8 and save it. Now, if you can see, I did this HTML document using nothing else but Notepad. Notepad is a simple text editor. This means it's a simple text file, which I'm going to close now. You can launch your HTML file by clicking on this first.html. When you double click it, the default web browser of your computer will open this file. So if you can see, the title over here has been set to my first HTML doc, whereas the message displayed is hello world. And there is nothing else on this because no other content was written in for us. Okay, this is how you create a simple HTML document. In the next chapter, we will start using HTML using VS Code or any other code editor that we would like to use. But in our case, we are going to use VS Code, which is much more user friendly. Thank you. So let's get started with creating an HTML document. This time I'm going to do it using VS Code, which is a good code editor. Now, this is what the VS Code window looks like. And before you get started, what I'd recommend is you install the following extensions. To do that, you can click on the settings icon over here and click on extensions. And in extensions, you can simply look for HTML. Now, by default, it gives you the HTML CSS support IntelliSense, which is a good extension, and I have installed it. Or you can use the HTML boilerplate. What this does is basically creates a basic HTML document for you, so you don't have to go through the mundane task of creating an HTML document. Now, to get started, let's open the folder which we dedicated for creating our HTML documents. So I'm going to hit open folder, and the one I created is in C drive HTML basics. I'm going to select folder. This automatically opens up my files which I had created earlier, that is first.html, my XML document, or even the test.html which I created as an empty document. That is one more extension inside VS Code that is called live server. Okay, And you can also look for that extension and install it. It's called Go Live by Microsoft vscode. It basically hosts your web page locally, so you can run it as if it was running on a server. If this is not possible for you, then you can simply go to the folder where you have created your files and double click on the file, that it loads in a page automatically. All right, let's get started. So the second file which I had created was test.html, and I'm going to start creating an HTML document. So by default, the extensions allow me to create a boilerplate, that is a ready-made piece of code for HTML. Now, if you see, again, I have a title document. I am going to call it second HTML, and then I have body. Now let's also hit go live. Now go live has basically started a copy of that web page on this web browser for me, and it is loading from my local IP address that is assigned to my local host, that is my computer. Now to ease of code, I am going to split the screen. So half of my screen would be the code window and the rest half of the screen is going to be the output window. Let's get started. Now, as I said, in body tag is where you place the elements that you want to display. Now, a sample element which we did was heading 1, hello. If I hit Control S, if I save my document, automatically that gets refreshed on the page on the left side. If I use H2, it's much smaller. If I use H3, it is even smaller. So this can go up to H5, which is much smaller. Now these are heading elements, and by default a heading element consumes the entire width of the screen, and it basically is going to display the text in a particular size. Now when there were no special style sheets available in HTML, that is any special piece of code that colors your document or adds some media attributes to it, such as giving it a background color, foreground color, or some size, that is when you had just simple HTML. So the definitions were decided inside the elements itself. So H1 to H5, H3, H1, H2, H3, H4, and H5 were basically created so that you have variable sizes of texts. Here you go again. Similarly, we also have a paragraph element. A paragraph element consists of n number of items. This is a paragraph. And similarly, you had a bold element, that is defined by the angle brackets with B inside it, and that makes your text bold. Similarly, you have italic. And as you can see, unlike H1, H2, H3, and paragraph, bold and italic turned out to be in the same line. They did not take up the next line for the characters to be displayed again. So the lines were displayed on the same line as far as space was available on the browser's width. This is because these are of the inline type and these are of the block type elements. We'll learn more about them as we go ahead. So this is how you can start creating an HTML document. Let's move on to the next section. Thank you.